What's up, everybody? It's your programmer Ryan, and today we're going to be doing some use cases, or building some use cases. This is episode 3 of Let's Build a Workout Log application. So yeah, without further rambling, I'm just going to jump in and start coding. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to borrow, well, let me create a new package first. So this package is going to be called just use cases. And I am going to borrow some implementation from a library, which a friend of mine has created. Let me just paste it in, and then I'll talk about that. So we're going to copy and paste two classes here. And I'll show you where to find the repository. So the classes which I'm going to be having my use cases extend, depending on their nature, are use case with params and use case, just a plain old use case. And these classes are from a clean architecture repository from a good friend of mine, Gradle. So what I would suggest is if you're into building multi-module clean architecture style applications in Kotlin, then go ahead and check out his repository here. The repository is github.com/bitsy.rel/cleanarch or arc. And yeah, just go and check it out. You'll see there's a whole bunch of different little classes which you can use depending on what kind of approach you take. So yeah, I can't remember, I don't think, yeah, I didn't make any modifications in this particular application, but I will be using these. So basically how it works is use case with params, it should be pretty self-explanatory, but params will be the thing if you need to like pass in an ID or a creation date or something like that, then you would use the use case with params. Otherwise, you would use just the regular old use case. So I'm not sure if I'll actually end up using the regular one all that much, but we'll keep it around just in case. So what I thought I'd do, so oftentimes in these videos I'll do kind of like some rambling at the start, trying to explain what's going on. In this case, I'm going to be able to explain to you how to write these use cases out and build them using test-driven development as I go, and that's going to be easier. It's actually quite a simple process, and that's going to be easier than, say, just rambling at the start. Before I do that, I just want to make sure that I have my testing libraries set up. So it looks like I do. So over time, I've tried to like really reduce the number of libraries that I use for testing. So you won't see a whole bunch of Espresso, Roboelectric, that kind of thing. It's not really my style. I'm not saying you shouldn't use those libraries, and there is a particular pattern in software architecture which I use to basically make it so that testing things like UI controllers is less, testing them directly is less important. In particular, I use the what in Martin Fowler's naming conventions is known as passive view, and in Uncle Bob's naming conventions is known as humble object. And it basically just means that my logic classes, which are kind of like a presenter, basically tell the view what to do explicitly. It makes it so that the view doesn't really think about anything. It's almost devoid of logic. So I just make sure that this thing calls all of the appropriate functions on the view, and the functions are kept very simple. So anyways, we'll see lots of examples about that when I actually go about building the views. But that'll take quite some time before we get to that. Today what we're working on is use cases, which is still part of the domain layer. And as you'll see, what I'm going to be able to do is there's certain sort of business logic which I can pretty much plan ahead of time. in order to just make sure that my application is prepared to do the things that I expect it to. And in case you should already be aware of this if you're watching these videos in sequence, but I have not written a single activity, fragment, view model, anything. All I've built out in terms of actual classes is everything in the domain module. I haven't done any work in the front-end module or the back-end module other than Gradle configuration. So, yeah, anyways, let's get started. So, some of these use cases are going to be so simple that I won't test them. So if they are so simple that they're just calling some particular function in the back end, so off the top of my head, if we're just calling like delete workout in the repository, then basically I'm not going to test that. I'm just going to test it with my eye. The moment any of my use cases start to actually have logic in them that needs to be handled, so for example, what's a good example here? A good example could be, let's say I want to load a template. So the user wants to start a new workout, but they want to load that workout from a template instead of having to type everything out. So in that case, I would get the workout template from the template repository, and then I would pull the workout object out of that template, because if you recall from the previous episode, a workout template actually possesses a workout object. And then I would write that workout object with the current date to the workout repository. So that's the kind of thing where it does make sense to have a use case. Whereas with the simpler one, and it makes sense to test them. I'm gonna boil testing down to something very simple. So you will hear people say that you should have 100% code coverage in your application. That's really difficult. And I'm not saying you shouldn't, but here is my advice on when you really should test something. Test logic. So if we have a situation where we're just calling one function from the use case to the repository, delete workout, that's not really logic. It's just one single command. The other example I gave with the workout templates, all of a sudden we're asking one repository for an object, and that event could fail. And if it does fail, then that changes the next step in the use case. So that's when you do need to write tests, and you need to test every potential path. So here I go explaining things ahead of time. Let's get started with writing some use cases. So I'm going to start with the workout repository. And we'll just go to town here, as they say. So first one is actually going to be pretty much almost... a lot of these are actually going to be almost identical to the functions in the repository. And again, like I explained, there's a degree to which in some cases these use cases... there's a degree to which in some situations having use cases is just an arbitrary extra layer of abstraction. It's kind of one of those things where if you commit to using them, you might as well use them. Otherwise, it's going to be kind of confusing where in some places you're talking directly to the repository, and in some places you're talking to the use cases. So if I decide to use use cases in a project, which pretty much means that the project must have a little bit of complexity in the back end or the middle layer, then I'm going to go ahead and make use cases for everything just to simplify things. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with get workouts, and I'm going to keep the names very, very clear. So we are going to say get workouts by date, like so. And then we're going to type class get workouts by date. and that's going to extend, what is it going to extend? Use case with params, and then I'll need to specify the parameters. Let me just jump into the other project to see how I did this, because I have the memory of a goldfish. Delete reminder. Okay. So, alright, so we have the parameters. So get workouts by date requires a date and a selection. So I'll need to make sure that I'm including those things. So we're going to include, okay, this is interesting. So I have two different parameters that I need to pass in here. So I'll have to think about how to set that up properly. All right, so immediately we're at a bit of an impasse here. I have basically two things I could do. In this case, I have multiple parameters that I need to send into this particular use case. And I think that happens in a couple different repository. And that happens in other places. So I've got a couple different ways I could solve this problem. So one of the ways is I could change the base use case class in order to account for the different potential inputs. Or the other thing I could do is I could make different use cases, and within the use cases I will either be calling get custom exercise templates, and then within that use case I will decide which, if it's get custom use case, then I will pass in true for is custom, for example, or in the case of the workout repository, I'll have to go with like get workouts by month. So see, this is one of the interesting things. In the previous episode, when I was building these things, I was all happy with myself that I was able to make it so that I condensed, for example, get workouts by date, which was originally supposed to be get workouts by day and get workouts by month. I was all happy that I was able to condense those into one function here in the repository. But in doing so, I had to create repository functions with two parameters. Not even thinking about the fact that, just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about here. So I could have a situation where I like pass in some special object as parameters. So for example, I could pass in an object which possesses, say, for example, a string for the filter and a boolean. So I could go that route. I could make multiple. I could do something like a little bit hackier, which I'm not going to do. Like I could pass in like a list of type any, and then I could pass in like kind of whatever I want. I'm not going to do that. That's a very hacky thing to do. So what I'll have to think of is, should I build a domain object which represents like a request object almost? Or should I just build different use cases? So my let me just think about this a little bit longer. My intuition is telling me that what I ought to do is I ought to have different use cases. So have a use case get workout by day, get workout by, oh, that was a good voice crack, get workout by second, and get workout by month. So I think It's always a tricky thing because what I want to do is I want to find some kind of balance between separation of concerns. So what I just explained is more of a separation of concerns approach. So we're just separating the different use cases or user stories. As a user, I want to be able to look up exercise by month. As a user, I want to be able to look up exercise by day. But on the other end of that is trying not to have too much repetitive code. So I think what I'm going to do is I will create separate use cases and handle it that way. And so that way I won't need to create more domain objects in order to pass them in as parameters. And I won't have to change the repository methods as far as I'm aware. It would be kind of nice to keep them the same, I think. So this is the kind of thing when you're building applications live. I'm trying to share the actual process here. When you run into these kinds of situations, you want to just take a little bit of time. Don't rush into anything and just explore different possibilities. Like I say, I could solve this by changing the parameters, or I could just make more use cases, essentially. And I think that's what I'm going to do. And we'll see. I might change my mind later. This is the main reason why I build applications like this, is I try to build things so that they're easy to change, because I change my mind quite a bit. So, with that being said, we're going to rename this thing, get workouts by date. This is going to become get workouts by day, and it's going to become something different. So in this particular case, we're going to just pass in a string date, so that'll be a string, and we're going to return the result wrapper. So result wrapper, which of course takes an exception, and then it's going to be returning a list of workout objects. Oops. There. Okay. So, now that that is done, I will add in the repository here. Repository, this is going to be iWorkout repository, like so. And it's not abstract. So I am going to implement this thing, but I'm not actually, or I'm going to add this function stub, but I'm not actually going to write it. Already I'm at the point where I want to be building this out with test-driven development, because this is, because I need to be absolutely certain that it's sending something particular to the repository, not just a single string. Already I'm kind of thinking to myself, oh, okay, I should probably write some tests for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click on the main folder, and there was a way to like make a I think I'll just have to do this manually. So let's just go ahead and do that. So I'm gonna, keeps thinking I'm clicking and dragging. Let's go to new directory, test, and I'll have to build out the package name structure. So let's just do that. That should be adequate. Then we're going to go new file, and it's obviously not recognizing this as a test directory. So what I might do is I might see if I can configure that properly, because it is showing up in my other project. Okay, so this file is going to be get workouts by day test and .kt, and that'll be the file that I actually basically write the test in. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have a quick look at the module configurations to see if I can set that up as the test folder. So just give me a minute. hopefully, I'm sure there's a way to get it to show up as a test directory. Maybe if I just start writing, setting a test class up, it might do that. But at the end of the day, we'll get it figured out. Okay, so what we're going to do is, for my own personal preferences as far as testing is concerned, I like to do a combination of JUnit 5 and Mockk as a mocking library. So what we're going to do, so to write out a particular test, what I will start with is just basically an explanation of what this particular use case is supposed to do. So I'm going to write that out at the top of the use case, not in the test class. So this is going to be, I'm basically going to like rewrite the user stories, and this is my actual process. I go from like user stories or problem statements to like an itemized list if I need, if it's like a more complicated use case, and then I'll just kind of go from there. So when a user requests, so when a user opens the application, retrieve all workouts on the current day. And this is unnecessary for a use case this simple, but I'll just kind of show you the whole process. So we're going to say, so this is like an itemized list of steps. You'll see a better example with the more complicated use cases. Request request workout list from repository. And so oftentimes I will copy and paste these statements into the different test cases and then modify them as necessary. So in order to set up our testing environment, I'm just going to have a quick look at how I do that in the other project here. So what we're going to do is we're going to say val repo I workout repository. Not sure why that's not showing up. Okay, so I believe I figured out what the problem is. I have to rant for a minute. Okay, so this is why I really dislike the Android perspective in Android Studio. What I'm talking about is this thing up here. So this is the other project, Pos Trainer, that I'm basing this application off in many places. And so I'm looking at the a domain module in this application, and I'm just looking to see how the package structure is set up. So I just see tests, com, blog. So I think, okay, well, I'll just copy the same thing in Catalyst, which is what I did, test, com, blog in the source folder. And I'm like trying to figure out, okay, why isn't this friggin' thing working? So then I tried, I did some Googling, and I noticed that there's supposed to be like a Java source folder. So then I switched to project, and then I see that what has happened is that the Android perspective just, I guess to optimize things, just hid the Java folder there. So I totally missed that, and I'm pretty sure that if I add that in now, which I'll probably have to do, actually let's try it this way. Let's go to directory Java. Yep, shows up, and then I'm just going to drag that in there, and everything should work fine now. So, holy crap, that's annoying. Like, that is, yeah, anyways, I'm just going to carry on. Like, I'm wondering why this friggin' thing isn't working at all, and I can't remember, did I have some configuration in the project structure or something like that? Nope. Okay, cool, so we've got our test class working, and now I can shut up and carry on with what I'm doing. So, what I'm going to do is, so, by the way, a quick note, so some people in test-driven development, and when I say some people, even Uncle Bob, basically advocate that you shouldn't write a single line of code until you have a failing test. I'm on the fence about that one. I kind of get the logic, but at the same time, after applying this process to many different projects, I do kind of cut corners. So I don't write implementation of the thing that I'm trying to test, but I know this thing's going to need this repository. I know it's going to need the to return a result wrapper and those kinds of things. So I do kind of cut corners in production in that regard, but it results in the same level of test coverage, so I don't think it's too big of a deal. So when we want to test something, test-driven development, we create fake versions of the dependencies that the thing we want to test needs to talk to. In this case, I'm using Mockk, which is a mocking tool. You could also create a fake. Because it's a repository, I could just create a class here. Like I could create a class fake workout repo impl, which extends iWorkout repository. Implement that, and then I could just do that fake workout repo impl, and then I could implement this thing so that it returns particular responses, and I could tweak it a little bit. Like I could have flags in here, like I don't know, var return error of type boolean equals false, and then if I want it to return, that kind of stuff. In my case, I'm generally speaking, I'll prefer to use a mocking framework, which basically generates this thing through just function calls and stuff like that. But I do want to show people you don't have to rely on frameworks. It's largely a personal preference type thing. So anyways, so first we create the test doubles is what those are called, the mocks. And then I will create the actual thing, get workouts by day, the actual thing that I want to test. We'll just call this thing get workouts by day. And I'm actually going to say equals, and then for parameters, of course, we'll pass in the repo. Okay, so that's ready to go, and then we will create our first test case. So for the test case, we're going to say fun, and then I'm going to use the backtick character. If you're on Windows, that's the character above tab. If you're on Mac, then I'm sorry to say you are on your own. So we create that, and what that allows us to do is it allows us to make function names, which are kind of like plain English, or whatever language you're comfortable with. So, and then I'll usually make these things quite descriptive. So on get workouts by day successful. And oftentimes, again, I wouldn't really do this typically, but just to show you the process, I would only do this for more complicated use cases, but I like to paste in the problem statement or user story that I'm working with in the test cases. And once you later on, you'll see how I structure these things for more complicated tests. I'll actually include multiple different potential event streams or different paths that the application can potentially take. Okay, so now that we have our test case here, I'm just going to see if this thing compiles. And yep. Okay, so the test is compiling but passing. So what we're going to do next is we're going to type. So what I need to do is I need to create a way to basically have easy access to test data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another file in this package, and it's going to be called test data. And in here, I'm going to create some functions. So just top-level functions to generate test data. So we're going to have fun. So first there's fun get workout. Now, how this is going to work is we're going to include what are known as default arguments in the function, and then those will kind of get extrapolated or added to the arguments we use to create the workout object. So get workout equals workout. Yes. And so here's how we're going to do this. So I'm just going to change the syntax a little bit. Okay. So what we're going to do, first I'm going to hit Control P here and see what we require. So we need a string. So we've got string name created on exercises. Okay, so now we're going to create the default argument. So name equals, what's it going to be? Herp-de-derp. We'll just say everyone's favorite in the gym, International Chest Day, which for those of you who don't know is typically Monday. That's a bit of a joke in the workout community. I don't think I'm doing these default arguments correctly. Let me just double check in the other thing how I do that. Turn all fun. I see, I need to supply the type. Type. Oh. Lots of voice cracking today. Okay, and you'll see later on how this kind of works. Okay, so we've got name. What was the other one? I already forgot. Memory of a goldfish. Created on. So we're just going to say created on string equals, and we'll just do like today's date. This doesn't matter at all. It'll look a little bit different in production, but we're going to say 16/07/2019. Like I say, that'll look differently. It'll also include like the hour and second and stuff like that, but I don't really care about that in the testing phase. And then the last one was a list of exercises. So we're going to say exercises, list of exercise equals, and here we're going to say get exercise, which is going to be another top-level function, fun get exercise. And we're just going to build this little tree of test data out, essentially. And like I say, because we have these default arguments, what we can do is when we just want, like, whatever, just some default workout object to run our tests against, we can just call get workout. If we need to specify something, then we can be even more specific, so we can supply something other than these default arguments, and that's a really nice feature of Kotlin. Okay, so we're going to do, let me just finish this off first. So name created on, and then exercises. Control-Alt-L. Okay, so that finishes that off except for get exercise. Get exercise requires equals exercise. This is going to be, excuse me, get exercise. So it needs a name. So we're going to say name string equals, since it's International Chest Day, we're going to do bench press, barbell, bench press, which I don't even really do barbell bench press anymore, to speak of working out and confuse people who have never worked out. My shoulders are so imbalanced because of multiple injuries that I don't even do bench press with barbell, because I find I just never, one side always gets worked more than the other. Anyways, okay, so name, what else do we have? Come on, Control P, help me out here. Okay, so I'm doing this wrong. I'm typing this in the wrong place. That's what's going on. So that's going to be name. List of sets. Yeah, set. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to say list of. God, I love Kotlin. Like, that's so cool. Just slap that in there and it generates a list. Like, you could never do shit like that in Java. I'm sure there might be some way in like the newer versions of Java to do it, but it was that kind of stuff which made working in Java pretty annoying. Okay, so here we're going to say list of get set. And then, oh, that's already a function. Get set, oops, fun get set. I'm actually surprised that I don't have to supply the return type. I guess because it's like single expression syntax, whatever. So get set again equals set and I'm not sure. So it seems to have imported the wrong set object. Yep. You should know by now what this thing is, you silly IDE. Set interface does not have constructors. It's not an interface, so let's see what's going on there. Yeah, it's definitely not an interface. So I'm just going to carry on for a moment here. It's like it's imported it incorrectly. Yeah, it's imported this set interface, but it's not actually showing the import, so that's kind of irritating. I think what I might have to do is import it directly, maybe. Let's go to exercise. Exercise. And I'm just going to copy a import statement, and I'll see if I can fix it that way. So where's my test data class? I don't know why actually, yeah, that's dumb. Let's just hit Control D. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Let's just hit Control D, set. Okay, and hopefully that'll, yeah, that fixed that up. Great. Okay, so here we have timer reps. So we're going to do, let's see, we'll just assume reps. I'll type reps or time, and it's a string. And let's say we're doing barbell bench press. I think for barbell bench press, a good rep range is maybe 6 to 8, so we'll do 7 repetitions. Of course, depends on your opinion. And then what was the other value? It was weight. Let's make this one funny. So it's an integer, was it? Yeah. Oh, I actually reversed this. My bad. There we go. And this one's a string. And for weight, yeah, because I don't do bench press and I have like really long monkey arms, I would say my 8 or 7 rep maximum is probably something like 145 pounds, which is pretty pathetic for a guy who's working out, has been working out as long as I have. But on the bright side of things, I can out deadlift most bench monkeys who can bench a lot more than me, and I'd rather be stronger at the deadlift. Anyways, once again, that is workout talk. If you're a programmer, you're probably wondering what the hell am I talking about? Or I should say just a programmer. Reps are time, weight. Okay. And that's going to need to be, let's just put it in pounds. You guys might, for some of you might have been thinking I was talking about kilograms. No, I was talking pounds. I cannot. 145 bench press in kilograms is actually like that's a pretty significant amount. Okay, sets. And what else do we need? Exercise type, which is our enum. So that's going to be, so type, exercise type equals exercise type dot barbell. So as you can see, we're just like building out just some test data, like a little tree of it. And that's all I need to do for now. So why do we do that? Well, the effect of that is that in our tests, whenever I want some test data, like for example, a workout or even a list of workouts, in this case, this is get workouts by day. So we'll return 2 workouts. I'm going to say val test workouts equals list of, don't need that, get workouts. And I see this has been overloaded. So can I say test data dot get workouts? No. Okay. I'm going to rename this thing to just whatever use case. Let's just call it that, and then I should be able to call it get workouts. Oh, no, I'm being an idiot. Or maybe I'm not. Yeah, I'm being an idiot. Get workouts. So it should recognize that function. Why are you not recognizing that function? Is it going to... Can I import it? Let's do... I'll try and manually import it. Maybe that'll work. Having lots of fun today. Just give me a minute here. Let me try and figure out why this isn't working properly. Why is it not importing that? Is it the way I structured these things? Internal fun. Maybe if I'm going to try and build the project, and that might do it. Maybe it needs to like generate them or something. Oh, hold on a minute. Yep, I'm an idiot. There we go. Oh man, I'm sure like some of you people watching this probably think like, is this guy actually like any good at programming? Well, I'm okay at programming, but I am an idiot. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so I've got the test data I want. Now what I need to do is I need to configure this mock to return the test data. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, let's see if I can remember how to do this off the top of my head. So this needs to be, this needs a special modifier because this is going to be a suspend function in the, as you can see in the use cases. So we need to do something a little different. Let me figure out. Okay, there we go. So what we need to do is we need to use a special coroutine builder because the use case, the function we'll be calling on the use case is a suspending function, which means we need to call it from a coroutine scope. So how we can do that is if I just, let me just close up some things here. Domain. What's this? Yeah. Oops, that's actually what I wanted. So build.gradle. So I've imported what happened there? I've imported a library called Kotlin X coroutines test, and in that library there's a special coroutine builder which is run blocking test, and this is going to allow us to execute tests on our coroutines, our suspending functions. So that's just a handy little tip there. So what we'll do next is so how Mockk works. I have a whole tutorial on this. If you're curious, just check out my channel, Test-Driven Development with Mockk. What we do is we need to configure the responses. So when we're not in coroutines land, we use the every block. In this case, we're going to use the, I should say, expression. We're going to use the co-every expression. So let me just type it out. So co-every. So what I'm checking for is, okay, so every time a particular function is called on the repo, so repo.getWorkoutsByDate in this case, every time that's called, and I need to supply specific arguments. So how can I do that? I think what I'll do is I'll just supply the date from the test workout. Or let's do it this way. Val test date. That makes it a little more legible. equals get workout dot created on. There we go. Then test date, and then it's expecting something else, which is the date range. So that's actually something. So that's going to need to be like a constant, or no, it's going to be one of our enums. Val, we'll say date range day equals, and I made that an enum, I think. Date range dot day. So let's do that. Actually, I'll just include that right in there. I don't think, yeah. No, I won't, because I'm going to copy and paste this later for the other ones. So, yeah, don't repeat yourself. Okay, so date range day. Okay. So we're saying when this thing gets called with these parameters, then we add a returns expression. So returns, so in this case, I want to return the test workouts. There we go. Returns test workouts, but because we're working with a result wrapper, we need to say result wrapper dot build test workouts. So in case it isn't clear, what's going to happen is when I call this function in the test environment, it's going to return the test data, test workouts, which is defined up here, unless something has gone wrong. So if it gets called with the wrong parameters, it won't work. Yeah, that kind of thing. Okay, so then we get back to the actual thing that we're testing. So we're going to say use case dot. So we're actually going to get a. We're not going to worry about the return, what it returns, but we're going to worry about what functions it calls. So we're going to say use case dot execute, and it's going to be given test date as the test data. And then the last step here is we want to verify what it's doing once we call this particular function. So now we're going to say co-verify, because again, we're in coroutines land. So I want to make sure that this thing was called faux show, and I want to make sure that it was called exactly once. All right, continuity error. So I'm going to be picking up this coding session up on the following day because some stuff came up and I was not able to finish what I was working on. But yeah, just going to continue working on coding out some use cases. So I see where I left off was implementing get workouts. So I'm just going to have a quick look at the actual function. Get workouts by day, and yep, looks like we're ready to go. So I think what I was doing yesterday is I was going to talk about some other functions of Mockk, including I think verify no further interactions. I don't think I'm going to bother with that because I just want to get these things written, but there are some extra things you can add to your unit tests through Mockk to like verify that there wasn't extra things being called. Generally speaking, I'm pretty happy just using the these basically kind of default arguments or parameters for verification statements. So if I want to make sure something isn't called at all, I can supply 0. If I want to make sure it's called once, I can supply once. It's basically technically it's like less exact than adding the extra stuff in, but there's a degree to which I just don't really care. So anyways, it's a very simple function, so I'm not too worried about screwing that up. So at this point, I'm just going to run this test and make sure that it is running but failing. Okay, that's what we want to see. The operation is not implemented. So at that point, I can jump into the unit, which I am testing, and I can implement it. So what we need to do here is we just need to retrieve all of the workouts on a given day. So the trick here is that I need to make sure that I'm passing in a specific parameter to the repository, and this test should make sure of that. So we'll just kind of see how that goes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, so we're passing in the parameters as a string. So we're going to say return repository dot get workouts by date, and then we're going to say, so for date, the first parameter is just going to be the thing that we pass in, which is params, and the second one needs to be that date range thing. I forgot what I called it. Date range.day. Date range.day. Okay. So yeah, and that should actually be all I need to do. So like I say, if most of my use cases were this simple, then as you can see here, this is basically just an extra arbitrary level of abstraction. Whereas in this particular case, I do have some use cases which are a little more complicated than that. So anyways, let's just get busy and run that test again. All right, that's working out properly. So yeah. And so, of course, the one final note on testing before I just kind of power away and stop talking as much. So when it comes to testing, there's one other thing you need to be really aware of. One, you can have a situation where your test or a suite of tests is passing, but they aren't well formed. So what that basically means is that your test isn't correct. So I'm trying to think of some kind of analogy which I could use. Okay, let me give you an analogy like this. I love engineering analogies because it's more like a visual thing. So let's say, for example, this is an analogy I use all of the time. Let's say, for example, we're building a rocket for a space shuttle, and we want that rocket to be able to function properly in varying temperatures, ambient temperatures. So we want our rocket to be functioning properly when it's 35 degrees Celsius above outside, and also when it's minus 15 outside. So let's say we, as engineers, set up 3 different test scenarios. So we do one test where we build 3 different rockets to the same design specification, and we test each of them in these different scenarios. And we've got basically a good test suite set up. So we've got one at a high temperature, one at like a normal temperature, one at a freezing temperature, and they all pass. So by analogy, what a poorly, or I should say an improperly formed test could be is, let's say, for example, in the freezing test, for some reason, just make up a reason, I don't care, we weren't actually able to get the ambient temperature down to minus 15 degrees Celsius, even though we thought we did, even though that's what the whole point of the test was. So by analogy, for example, I'm trying to think of an easier analogy here, but I could basically screw up on some kind of test data and through some freak accident still have the test passing, or I could just mess up. Maybe I supply the wrong default parameter for Mockk or something. So that's a form of user error, but it's just something you want to be aware of. And my advice is when your tests start acting funny, but they're not like crashing per se, that's when you really want to be looking at your tests as opposed to looking at the implementation, because that's kind of generally a hint that things are going wrong. So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm just going to get down to work here. I'm going to put some music on. I might edit some music in for you programmers and syscripters out there, but I'm just going to go to town, write out all of the test cases that I feel like writing for the various use cases, and that'll basically be the end of building the use cases, at least for the time being. So let's get to work. Okay, lightweight, baby. All right, so I'm just going to add in a couple of error classes. So that's one thing I will talk about. Oops, I'll just make a new package for that. And the way I like to do this is basically just create objects. It's going to be and let's just go ahead and create a couple different exceptions for various repositories. Oops. Okay, that's good enough. All right, and this is kind of a pointless test, but I should just kind of make sure that it's actually returning a failure result. So I'm just going to say val result equals. So here we're going to actually take the value of the use case and then check what it is. So we're going to say we're going to use a JUnit and JUnit function here. Let's see if I can remember. Assert, let's say assert result dot result is result wrapper dot error, and that should be all I need to do. Let's just see if that works. Okay, good to go. Let's move on to the next one. Actually, I'm just going to copy and paste it. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. I guess that's fine. I was actually trying to copy the test case, or test class. Okay, so all we're going to change here is just state range dot mont. Oops, let's just do this more intelligently. Okay. Cool, month, looks good. And this one's again going to get changed. Okay, so we execute, see if these are failing, but compiling. There we go. Okay, so the wrong thing is getting sent here. No answer found. Oh, that's because I'm testing against the wrong use case. There we go. That should fix it. Boom. All right, what else have we got? Let's just stick with the workout repository for now. Because reasons. Oops, wrong one. You know, this is just a one-off. I'm not even going to write a test for it. Fuck that shit. Gonna be a cowboy. That's a bit odd. Ah, I see. Okay. It's looking good. work out. Ah. Okay, there we go. That's really important. I got to think of a filter. Filter. Okay, so it is like fucking 30 degrees in my recording studio. I've got to figure out, I should say recording booth. I got to figure out what to do about these filters. So the user wants to search based on a particular filter, and I kind of need to determine what those are. So I guess they're either going to be, I think they're going to be the enums, actually. So let's go to constants. So we have exercise targets. So I want the user to be able to search exercises for a particular body part. Also want the user, I don't think I really care about having them search by exercise type. Not super concerned. I guess I could. And then the other thing would be whether or not the exercise is custom. So I think what I might do is I might I'm going to make, so I'm not going to do an enum for this, but I'm going to make a file called constants, and I'm going to say const val is custom, and it's not going to be a Boolean. Actually, no, we're going to do it like this. We're going to say custom. Oops, managed to miss the quotations. And then we're going to have default there. So what I want to be able to do is, and I'm actually going to change this. Am I going to change it so that the user can look up? I could change this into a list of filters, which isn't that bad of an idea. That way it would be like a, you could filter by like checkbox kind of thing. I think I am going to do that. So we're going to say list of string for this particular function here. And we're going to get rid of is custom. And that's going to make everything a little bit easier, I believe. So anyways, back to our regular programming. Excuse the pun. Okay. Why is it complaining? Oh, I see. Okay, let's do dot target. There we go. So it'll be a list of exercise templates. Yeah. should probably make the use cases repositories private. So this, yeah, it does need parameters, filter. Okay. Not super concerned about handling the error case here. That should be good enough. Exercises. Oh, I need to make sure that it doesn't really make sense to have two use cases anymore, I don't think. Again, this is the kind of thing that one can kind of change their mind on. Yeah, since I've eliminated the is custom thing, it doesn't really make sense to... Yeah. What I'm going to do, I'm actually not going to differentiate these two things. I'm just going to have one use case. I named it the wrong thing to begin with. We're just going to say get exercise templates. Yep. And okay. Yeah, that's fine. I'm happy with that. Okay, just double check that. Cool. All right, moving on. What else have we got? So, okay. Okay. Kind of cheating on my TDD here because I'm not actually going to write a test class for this one. It's too simple. I'll just double check it with my eyeball though. Get workout templates. Yeah, looks good. Oh, shit. Whoops. Wrong one. Okay, so as you can see by the fact that all of the repository functions are colored something halfway between gold and yellow. So there are a couple other use cases which I'll plan on building eventually, but I'm pretty happy with what I've done so far. So these are just the basics, the things that I know we're going to need. There's a couple ones, like for example, basically when the user wants to load a new workout from a template, then that would be a situation where we'll need something maybe a little bit more complicated. So I might I think I'll finish that one off and then we'll call it a day for today. There will probably be more ones to work on, but that's going to be one of the more complicated ones. And to be honest, at this point, I'm almost kind of regretting my decision to even bother with use cases in this application, because most of these, as you can see, are just one-liners. And as you can see, I really only will apply test-driven development to things which are at least one step removed from a one-liner. I'm sure some people would disagree with that, but, whatever, man. Okay, let's work on the more complicated one. Ah! Too many arguments. Oh. Oops. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I have lost about a pound through sweating. But that's all of the use cases which I think I'll need for now. And what I'll be doing next is actually working on user interface stuff. So now that I have a good idea of what the domain objects look like and my use cases are put together, now what I can do is I can start to think about what the user, actually design the user interface. So since I just happen to have a sketchbook in front of me, the step I'll usually follow, oh yeah, great. The step I'll usually follow after I build out my basic domain layer, and again, I'm not trying to predict everything, I'm just trying to get a good idea, is I'll then move into basically drawing sketches for the user interface, or sometimes if I have the time I'll use InVision, but oftentimes I'll even just kind of go take a walk, sit outside, and draw some funny little sketches like this. That's me. This is for Pos Trainer. And the reason why I do that is because, generally speaking, I'm a very visual thinker, so I can basically plan what the UI is going to look like in my head quite easily. So I find oftentimes some of the other tools can kind of get in my way a little bit. But in any case, I suggest you use whatever approach works for you. If you're into using Photoshop or InVision or those different tools to draft the user interface, that certainly works. I just recommend you start by figuring out, at the very least, what kind of domain models you're going to have, because that's going to, of course, inform what data you're actually going to have to display on the user interface. So, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully that was interesting. I know that was very repetitive and a lot of busy work, but that's actually what day-to-day programming is often like. It's not necessarily always going to be exciting and action-packed, and stuff like that. But yeah, anyways, hopefully you at least learned something. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Peace out.